Start before you
You're not
got here,
sorry.
Lisa.
I like to cut everything as, I saw Christina kind of looking, I was like, oh, okay, well,
I was smiling. Wasn't that good? Just want to make sure you were okay.
oh, yeah.
Would we let
You're
them,
settled, let us know, and then we'll essentially call it to order when you're ready to start. Go ahead.
I'm ready anytime.
Go ahead. Actually, got approval agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Is
So moved.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion, the agenda is approved. There are minutes from the August 2 meeting.
Pull your chair up.
Pull the chair, come on.
We won't bite you, I promise. We don't want seconds from the gallery.
Person who's going to be taking Sonia's place will be doing the voice.
Come on, Miss.
Done.
Lisa Slusher and see if this Tony.
yeah, we do.
I don't think I'll be
Wait,
soon.
All right, why don't we, let's go around the room. There's a lot of, all the I've taught class and I serve as county manager of Rutherford County and I'm a member of the Western Highlands Board.
I'm Mandy Stone. I'm assistant county manager in Coming on the Western Highlands Board.
I'm Charles Lyons, I'm the county manager of Mitchell County and the chairman of Western Highlands Board.
Tony, welcome to the group. Christina Carter, Chief Operating Officer.
I'm Tommy Duncan, and I will be poorly imitating Sonia after she is gone.
We're still in denial.
Sonia Price, Administrative Assistant, and your buddy for the next few weeks.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Slusher, CFO at Western Highlands and Smoky.
Charlie Shanghai, former COO at Western Highlands.
Brian Ingram, CEO.
Nancy Baker, Chair of the Community and Family Advisory Committee, representing Rutherford County IDD.
Jennifer Price-Farrell, Buncombe County Representative, parent of the DD.
And that's Jerry Rice with the camera that keeps us in the eyes of the YouTube people.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, is there I wasn't here, so I can't make the motion on the minutes, but is there a motion to approve the August 2nd minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Lisa, financial report.
Okay, thank you. These are still preliminary and unaudited. We have a couple of fund balance adjustments to make it year end, but we have done the IBNR, and I'll talk more about that when we get down in the liability section. Cash at the end of June, cash and investments is $26.6 million, and you can see compared to the prior year, it was $20.4 million, so we've got about $6 million more in cash than we had at the end of the prior year. Total cash including, good morning, come in. Let's see.
Make sure we're looking at
Is
the
this a
same one.
good
Are we working on
I'm
item 11,
sorry.
Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, now we've got these over there.
So I'm looking at, just to make sure we're kind of together here, because I know my presentation's probably different with the information than it's previously been. So I'm in the first column that says June 30, 13.
Right.
And under the assets, I'm looking at cash, $13,586,000, and what's called NCCMT, that's North Carolina Capital Management Trust Investments, $13 million, which that's readily available as cash. So I'm looking at those cash and investments total $26.6 million, just kind of rounding that. I was comparing that to the column to the right, June of 2012. And the cash at that time was $6.3 million, and the investments were $14 million. So it's about a $6 million increase over the end of the prior fiscal year end.
For those of you who were not around, for that actually be a positive balance for that, Charlie and the staff deserve tremendous credit. So that is truly astounding, given where we were a year ago. So.
The Medicaid risk reserve, which is in a separate checking account, and that's required by the Division of Medical Assistance, and again, 2% of the Medicaid funding goes into that account monthly. So that will continue to grow. It's at $4,277,000. Per contractual agreement with DMA, they will continue to fund that until that's 15% of your operating Medicaid budget. So
Until it gets to what figure-ish?
15%, I think the Medicaid here's 150 million, so that's like 17.5 million if my math is correct. It's something like that. And then when it's
Yeah,
combined
yeah.
with Smoky, it's like 275 million in Medicaid or something like that. So whatever 15% of that is, it's kind of hard for me to do that in my head. I guess it's 30 million.
Are Smokies, is their percentage about where ours is? We're at 4 of 175 million, so that puts us about 2.5%, you said, percent. Where are they in their percentage relative?
We are lower than that because we started on the waiver after Western Highlands.
Okay.
So I'm not sure in total what the percentage is, but it would be lower than Western Highlands.
Is it possible that by June 30 next year, they'll be on track to be close to being similar percentages? So as we do the merger?
No, no,
Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
The math hurts us after the merger.
Okay. This will help, actually, something we bring to, the Western Highlands bring to the table actually will help probably then. Okay.
Yeah. And at the point we're merged, DNA will look at the total Medicaid budget and the risk reserve, and they'll fund 2% of that
Right.
until we hit the 15%.
And
Not
Really
that we're
don't
allowed-
think about it.
Not that we were ever allowed to use it when we had trouble, but,
Right.
you know.
Well, that's-
It
yeah.
just knows there.
It made the cash count.
Rare.
It is interesting because it's supposed to be for cost overruns, but they have to approve it. And when we first, it looked like we were trending to go under, even though we never were under a break even, not under. We talked to them about it, was it available for use, and they said no. So, but it's there anyway. So,
Who gets the interest?
I'm not sure what a real crisis is to them, but by gosh, it's going to be worse than what we were facing a year ago, apparently.
It's a savings account for them to come yank back.
yeah, I think Janet, you just said who gets the interest on it, and Western
State.
Highlands
Or-
gets it, and Smoky gets it, and we're required to keep it in the risk reserve. So there's very little interest earned right now, but what is required to be in the risk reserve. And because it's 2% of what's being paid, you think about it, it would take 7.5 years because we're getting 2% annually.
Right.
So 7.5 would be about 15%. So it will take another 5.5 to 6 years to get it to 15%.
Under the current plan,
Yes.
which is not.
Yes. Just want to talk about the receivables. There's $7,052,000. We also added about $90,000 as an allowance for doubtful accounts. There's some old receivables there that I think potentially may not be collected. The $90,000 we added was from a loan to a provider, and we're working on trying to get that collected. But anyway, there's $7 million in receivables. DHHS and other receivables, $7 million. All of that was collected in July and August. I think there's still like $800,000 or something that's outstanding. That's what we had tried to work with them on to make sure it was paid by June 30, and it wasn't. So that's why that receivable is as high as it is. So Western Highlands total assets at year end were $38.4 million, and again, compared to that far right column prior year, $27.6 million. In the liabilities and fund balance section, accounts payables is $5,542,000, and I want to just take a minute and explain what's in there.
Yeah, that's a massive increase.
It is, and there's a couple reasons for it. We have been accruing the hospital supplemental payments that have not yet been made, starting in January of 13, when Western Highlands per member per month got adjusted. They started being paid hospital supplemental payments. Those are additional payments to hospitals to cover their cost. Statewide, we're all trying to figure out exactly how you pay and who you pay.
That
So-
happens statewide, that the supplementals
Yes.
went in.
Yeah.
Boy, they hate that. They did nothing for relationships with the hospitals.
Right, and we're committed to.
They hate that. I
Yeah.
hear,
We're committed to paying it to the
I know.
hospitals, but we gotta figure out how we
I
do
know.
it, who gets what.
Yeah.
Smoky started getting the PMPM in July. We haven't paid any yet either. We're trying to figure it out as a whole system about how we're gonna make it work.
just adds to the love fest, I got
It does, it does.
Is the reason we haven't paid a decision we've made as staff, or is it a state decision that we haven't paid? I mean, is it, You see what I'm getting at? Is
Who's
it-
not
is-
signing the check?
Who's not, you know, why are we, is it, the why, is it our why or the state's why?
Yeah, I would say it's our why right now, but according to DMA, you don't even have to pay it if you don't want to. You have the option of not paying. Talk about a love fest then, if
I'm
we decide
telling you,
not to
they know
pay it.
that, yeah.
So we're committed
I
to
am
paying
surprised
it.
I haven't had my door broken down. How much, you know, this is like, how
I'd
much?
love to share the love if you're not giving.
What can you do with it if you don't pay it?
Well, you can keep it, but I mean,
what
I mean,
strings
it
are
would
attached
go
to
in
it?
your unrestricted Medicaid fund balance.
So is it unrestricted?
But personally, I think we should pay it. It is to cover the hospital costs. DMA paid it to them in the past. And I think it's easy for DMA to say, oh, you don't have to pay it, but you talk about a love fest if we don't pay the hospitals, and I think we should pay them.
Have we got a
We're just trying-
plan for getting these payments out to the hospitals? Because, I mean, this is just,
We will have a plan, but we've got to figure out how to make it equitable and to know who gets what before we just start paying it.
I understand,
And
that's what I'm
we've
saying,
been
you got
working
have you got a
with.
schedule for getting this money out? I mean, in terms of a plan? So when the hospitals come calling me, or calling Chuck, calling Mandy, calling everybody in this room, I'd like to be able to say, yes, we all know there's a problem with it, yes, there's a lot of, you know, miscommunication, there hasn't been a lot of clarification, but here's the plan for getting decisions made and getting checks out. Can we get some sort of a plan like that available to us?
I can tell you what we're working on, even though I don't have a date to say when it will be.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to be standard
I
statewide.
understand.
There is a meeting being coordinated through the North Carolina Council with hospital staff and MCO staff, so we
Right.
can work on this together to say what the plan's gonna be. Because what we don't wanna do is, we're trying to be consistent across the MCOs. You know, are we gonna pay it in a per diem, or are we gonna just look at quarterly settlements? So we're trying to just be consistent before we all roll it out. There's nobody.
That is wonderful, I have no issue with that, just if you can get us a memo explaining that, saying, here's the plan for reviewing this, we're doing part of it statewide, you know, and this is what we're doing. They don't, what I don't want is them to think, after our work to build relationships with the hospitals, you know, and we're probably more sensitive to this as Western Highlands board members than you may be from the Smoky side, because we had a lot of frustration expressed to us by our hospitals, is if we're able to be a little bit more overt and say, here's what's going on, here's the plan for rolling out that money for payments.
Sure, big like.
So,
It makes it standardized across the state because
yeah.
a given hospital may have admissions from a variety of MCOs, so it's got to be, you know, you got to work out a fund.
And it's not due to them, they brought it up for me all man.
Right,
Yeah, it's just,
but it's just, if we
it's
could,
been
that would
since
be really
the
helpful,
PM
so
got a
thank you.
chance, but I do like that idea.
Okay, the other thing that's in the accounts payables is an estimated payback of about 4% of the state dollars back to the state. And we've talked before about how fiscal year 11-12, they had a settlement on 85% of the dollars, and now they have it on 100% of the dollars. I believe it's an unrealistic expectation because of the difference in accounting methods and cash and accrual and how the state does it, and I could go into a lot of accounting detail that we need to try to avoid for everybody's sanity probably, but the finance officer group statewide is still working with the budget office to come up with settlement rules. They have not published anything specifically, but there will be some kind of payback if there are unspent dollars, and there are some. It's about 4%. So that is estimated as a payback that may or may not have to be paid back. There are also strings attached to certain dollars that you've got to earn that are very difficult to earn through IPRS and now NC tracks. And it's not just Western Highlands, it's all the NCOs. If you look at their earnings, we continue to try to work with the state. I know one of the things they implemented last year was concurrent target pops, because when you only have one, you can only have an individual in one target pop, and they may get a substance abuse service and then a mental health. It may not be, one of them may not be allowed by the state, even though it's a valid service. So we continue to try to work with them to have them understand locally what we're trying to do and things that result in paybacks that just take money back out of the system. So that's why that payable is up substantially. Again, there's an estimated $2 million in hospital supplemental and then over $1 million in state, so that's why that's increased. Accrued Medicaid service. That's similar to what it was at the prior year end, but from what had been previously estimated, and this is the Medicaid IBNR, we have added $1.9 million to that amount. That may be conservative, meaning it may be a little overestimated, but I feel better overestimating the expense than underestimating. There are a lot of CRIs that are out there, claims, requests for resolution. We've also gone back and looked at authorizations to try to use that to estimate the expense, especially with residential services, the ICFMR, inpatient, things like that. When we started looking at it, and staff really have spent, I would say, weeks looking at this, some of the authorization data doesn't make sense, and I don't know if it's the data we're given or some of the authorizations. And authorizations haven't been changed if individuals have been discharged from residential, so there may be authorizations that are out there that we have no obligation to pay because the service was not provided and the provider won't bill against it. But there are literally like millions of dollars out there in residential authorizations that probably aren't valid. So we have estimated this amount. We've added the 1.9 million to it. We've taken into account the outstanding claims questions from providers that are under review to go back and make payments on. So I feel comfortable with where we are. I think we could work on it for weeks and weeks more and, you know, maybe have a little difference in it, but again, it's an estimation. So comfortable with adding the 1.9, which makes it $13,073,000. So I guess before we go on, are there any questions about what's been estimated or, and another example, using some of the data, on some of the data, we've paid more claims than we have authorizations for. And to me, it's like a crosswalking issue, you know, and we've just gone back and we've had staff look at it, relook at it, you know, try to analyze stuff, follow up with providers. Did this consumer get discharged from residential? I think we've done all we can do to get to a fair estimation. And I think it may be a little overstated.
Something we've worked very hard on because of the obvious. I mean, this is the managed care business. This is the money side of managed care right here. And to have to struggle this hard to get it in the ballpark, you know, I guess we're going to have to just accept it.
Yeah, and the
Well, I
audit,
think in the end, the auditors are going to establish that liability figure for you for June 30. My question would be is, are Western Highlands and Smoky on the same, if not on the same system, on the same policy track from July 1 forward this year? This is the issue we struggled with really hard last year. And Dan, Bill, I think, you know, worked so hard, you know, trying to come up with an IBNR that made sense to deal with these liabilities. Assuming we've got this about right, the auditors will, like you said, give us that final figure for June 30. From July 1 moving forward, do we follow the same policies for calculating IBNR so that when we do merge, we'll be consistent with one another?
yeah, when we merge, it definitely will be consistent.
Right,
Like,
yeah, of
right
course.
now, for July, August, and September, Western Highlands will still do their estimation their way, and then we'll still do it the Smoky way, and we'll see where we are. I'm much more comfortable doing it the Smoky way,
Well, obviously,
even though
yeah.
some of the data, though, that we're getting, it doesn't make it easy to do it the Smoky way.
You're not saying it's any better or any easier, it's just the way you're used
Okay.
to.
But if we,
I
well,
don't think
I think,
that's true.
I think
mean,
it
is.
That's why we're
Yeah.
sitting while we're sitting.
Yeah.
I say 1.9, be conservative. Because we
Oh,
got claims
absolutely.
issues in addition to history, and
Right.
that's not where we want to get soft
So-
being on the low ball.
So is the 13 million contain the 1.9, or are you
Yes.
saying, okay,
Yeah.
no, it is in the
so it's, that's why I
It is
understood
in
you, I just want to
yes.
double check that.
Yes.
So, you know, that's a smidgen under a month's worth of claims, if I recall the numbers, somewhere in that vicinity. And so that's not an unreasonable IBNR figure to use, you know, just a rule of thumb. It's not the right way to do it, but I mean, just from the
Right.
policy side, that's not an unreasonable amount.
What is the concern is how much effort it took us to get to an estimate. And the validity that we use and the way we do it, it's kind of like doing it forwards, doing it backwards, doing it sideways. It forces you to get to the same place, and we basically cannot do that with Western's data.
Well, join the club. Nobody else could either. I'm sorry, Brian.
That's why we don't have any bad
It
teeth.
has
We
been
grab
our
them out.
biggest nightmare over the past 16 months is knowing what that IBNR. You know, getting it until the consultants came in and worked with the finance, and they did the best job they could. But it seems like the overall number is consistent with you all going through it too. So I feel, you know, about a month, between a month and a half would be a reasonable figure, just based upon, you know, it takes a while to get claims in until we have a sense of what you can calculate it as an actual payable. Because this is the predicted payable. And, you know, if we're running about a month and a half worth, that's probably going to be about right. I think you guys are right in the ballpark.
Yeah, we'll just continue to compare the IBNR under the Western methodology and under the Smoky to see where we are at each month end to make sure that we're in the ballpark for July through September. The accrued state services are 1.5 million. So the total liabilities at the end of June is $20,199,000. The current revenues and the current expenses, you can see the revenues are greater than the expenses, so we have a net surplus estimated at the end of June of $7,189,000. And yes, you can compare that to the prior year policy. There was a $6 million
I'm just
deficit.
looking at Charlie and to all the staff of Western Highlands. I mean, yeah, it took a lot of work on the board's part, but frankly, it wouldn't have happened without the staff making the tough decisions. We may have made the policy to make it happen, but you guys actually made it happen. And that right there, those four numbers are the big, or those six numbers, if you will, are the big financial turnaround.
In that revenue over expenses, there's $2.9 million from risk reserve, so the surplus from operations is $4.3 million. And around a little over 200 of that is showing on the state side, so the rest of that is from the Medicaid side. I want to talk about some changes that have occurred in the fund balance and explain what they are, and again, there's still some fund balance adjustments to be made. So if you look down at the unassigned, it's a negative. I want to explain that. Let me just go to that one now since it's a negative because I don't want that to be alarming. What happens at year end when you have to make a year end accounting entry to reserve funding based on general statute. It's called reserve for state statute. And that amount equals basically what's in your receivable, because if you haven't received it, you can't obligate it, so you have to restrict it. Because the receivable is at $7,052,000, we had to increase the restricted by state statute up to $7,052,000. So what you do is you have to move money from your unassigned fund balance to your restricted. So by doing that, it makes the unassigned show as a negative amount. When we close year end, and I'm sorry, I know this is all accounting stuff, but I need to explain it to you because it will change this negative fund balance. When we close these revenues over expenses, it closes into your unassigned fund balance. So when we do this to close the books out, that will be a positive number. Okay. Right now, because we haven't closed the revenues over expenses, it shows us a negative. And I just don't want somebody to see that and go, oh my God,
So that
it
would
will be fine.
So presumably, it'll be in the vicinity of 5.7 million. You take 7.189 minus the 1.48, 1.468.
On my little note right here, I wrote 5.7 million, so yes, I agree.
Okay.
Exactly, you're exactly right, Carl. And that's about it's around a 4.5% unrestricted fund balance. But that's the very last accounting adjustment we will make, and it's not made yet. But we will make that when we do. Because one, I think you need to see what the revenue over expenses is before we do the last closeout. So that's why it's not done yet.
So are is our organization, I'm not even sure what to call us anymore, MCO, LME, area agency, whatever, are we governed by the LGC? Are we part of that 8% rule that counties at least are under, where we have a policy of a minimum fund balance of 8%? Okay. So we can expect a letter from Sharon saying we're under the 8%, or are we,
Well,
or the, I mean, it's a lot better than last year.
yeah.
But we were farther down, 8%, but I mean, is it something we just need to continue to work towards, or what?
Well, I think we need to continue to work towards it. Smoky at the end of last year was under the 4% too, and for unrestricted. And part of the reason for all of this is we've used our funding to get to Medicaid waivers.
I understand. I'm not, you know.
So we didn't get a letter.
Right.
So I don't know if, I believe we're still fall under their guidelines,
Okay.
but we did not get a letter, because we should have 8%. We should all strive to have 15% unrestricted, I believe. And that's one of the things we're trying to get the budget office to understand. We have to have a way to grow our unrestricted fund balance back, and having a 100% settlement doesn't help anybody. Yeah. Because then you can't ever.
And Brian, that's something for our legislative delegation to begin to understand at some point, is that their rules, because one of the criticisms of all the area agencies for years is these massive fund balances that were there, supposedly. And then we were, you know, cut back to draw those down, and now it's down, you know, we're under the state guidelines, so let me be interested to see how they play out. I'm not that they'll follow their own, they're not known for consistency, but.
Also, the committed board designated shows 251,797, and 1.2 million was approved by the board to undesignate at, I guess it was 2 board meetings ago. It had been 600,000 for crisis stabilization and 600,000 for network development, I think is what it had been called. So that's been moved also into the unassigned. And on the fund balance due from Medicaid to state and due to state from Medicaid, there's about a little over a 4 million surplus from Medicaid. That will be offset with this, and will show unassigned Medicaid and unassigned non-Medicaid. That way, I know, Carl, you had raised that as a concern, so it will show that the Medicaid unassigned will be offset by this previous $4.2 million loss. So the fund balance showing on here in total is 11 million.
That's my big, that's in my heart. Keep playing it, Joe.
So they'll be split out, and you'll be able to see that once these final year-end adjustments are done. The total fund balance is 11 million. Once that 7 million gets closed into it, it'll be around 18 million. So the total fund balance overall with the restrictions will be at 10%, or around 10%. So again, total liabilities and fund balance is 38.4 million. Any other questions on it? Okay. I'm going to go to the next one. It's the 2A. This is the state and federal income statement for year end. And I'm going to be looking at the third column of numbers. It says current year to date, third and fourth column. Just total revenues. This is state and federal, county, 35.3 million. So we realized 96% of the revenues. You see about 6 lines from the top, federal funds. We are only at 86%. Again, that goes to some of the target pop and service restrictions in the state system. I'm not sure any MCO owns all their federal dollars. Again, it's just something we try to pay attention to and make sure providers get individuals in the right target pops, but we all struggle to draw down the federal funds. On the expenditures, direct services, 31,691,000. Included in that expense is the estimated settlement with the state, so it's really about 1.2 less than that for services. I also want to just point out on these age disabilities, those are pretty subjective because you may be an adult getting mental health and SA service, so the service may show in one category and not another category. So when we had to add the state settlement back, I directed the staff to prorate it among some of these categories so it would not exceed the budget, because where do you put that estimated settlement? Is it crisis, adult mental health, whatever? But it just didn't seem reasonable or prudent to me to post it one place, have it be over budget, and then have to pay it back. So you really can't look at this and say, oh, we spent $6.5 million on adult mental health. Because again, a lot of people have co-occurring diagnoses. It is not easy to track in the system to know what age disability that expense is with. So I just want to highlight that. But anyway, the service dollars, $31.6 million, and again, that included the settlement. The total admin, $3,372,000. You can see administration, we spent around 88% of the state dollars for admin. The net revenue on the state side is around $239,000, and again, we have the payback built into that, so we will work with them to try to minimize any payback that we have. One of the things that's kind of unknown, any services that got in the IPRS system this year in the first couple months, they allow to go toward this year. So, you know, again, it's hard to settle with them because we don't operate on a cash basis like they do. You authorize services kind of based on your fiscal year. If they get billed in the next year, the state counts them toward settlement the next year. It really just doesn't work well that way. But that's their rules, so we try to play within it and minimize what we can as far as the payback goes. I'm going to move to the next statement, the item 2B. This is the Medicaid waiver. Again, I'm going to look at the third and fourth columns. Total revenues, $146,166,000, so right at 100% of the revenue is realized from Medicaid. And of course, there's no prior year comparison because prior year was 6 months, and it makes it a little misleading when you look at it, so that has not been included on this Medicaid statement. On the expenditures, total service, including the IBNR, is at 99%, and honestly, you can't get much closer. You can get closer or be under, but you can't get right at 100%. Because again, millions of dollars are being authorized. You're estimating what's going to be provided, not 100% of what's authorized is carried out. So we're at 99% of the service expenditures. Admin, 81%. So really, looking at that, where did the surplus for Medicaid come from? It's on the admin side. It's not on the service side, it's on the admin side. The net revenue for Medicaid, revenue over expenses, the net income, $6.9 million. Again, when you deduct the risk reserve, which that's really not from the operations, or the $2.9 million, you end up with a $4,029,000 surplus.
I think as board members, we just kind of reiterate, when we made the changes last year, and if there's a surplus left over, the surplus came out of the admin, it didn't come out of services. And I think that's the point of the board, that's the policy thing, about the board is to talk about how the problem was fixed. It was fixed using admin as much as anything else. There were cutbacks in services, but it was mainly redundancies and other things like that. The core was cut back in, it was through cutbacks in admin.
Well, you got a new capitation.
Yeah.
You got a
Yeah.
big
That higher
infusion. You got a big infusion.
You're right. What I'm just saying is, but as a board, we were starting to get criticized last summer because we were slashing services and things like that. But the real funding changes were made, yes, in PM, but also in keeping down admin.
Yeah, the service dollars are all being utilized, basically.
Right.
Are there any other questions on the financial reports?
Diane Bell used to give us the one spreadsheet that it was kind of guided us through the year, where we could keep track of the Medicaid. Yeah, the ran sideways. It's kind of that one, it was that one spreadsheet. I think you've done a good job here keeping track of it. It would be really helpful if at all possible to do that, because it allowed, and it may not be necessary anymore, but it was the one that allowed us to say, it gave us a projection through June 30th this past, through the end of the last fiscal year. It was really nice though, because it really gave us that projection out, you know, even though we were losing money starting on, and we could see how the actions and when it turned, and then we could watch as it did turn and monitor on a monthly basis. As I said, that may not be necessary now, but it was a really helpful tool for us. It may be something that the board might find helpful to continue to have, is basically it allowed it out to the end of the fiscal year. It wasn't just what we've done in a year date, but it was, here's how we anticipate the year ending also still.
We could do it for the July, August, September, you know, and then when we merge, we could blend it in.
I don't want to make more work if it's not necessary. It's just, it was a great tool for
It
us.
was for people that didn't understand, too many numbers, but it just took a few numbers at one time.
Yeah.
It's
Probably like the dashboards we do for our board.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But it was a projection dashboard. It allowed us to say, okay, we're believing in ourselves because we're believing, that they're going to make these changes and the numbers will work out. And it did work out. We were able to monitor that on a monthly basis and say, yes, we're hitting the targets.
I like graphs.
Yeah, we can,
Yeah.
It was just a few, less numbers, more big numbers, but less numbers.
Well, of course, with this stuff, it's the trend that you really want to look at.
And you can see that on that.
anything else on that, Carl? On the
Anyone else from
financials?
Committee members? You want to look at my,
Okay. Is it okay, Carl, if I just go to the fiscal monitoring report? Since we're
Please
getting-
do.
Okay. We've got two fiscal monitoring reports included in your packet. One on item 3 and 3A. I want to talk about item 3 first, and really just want to hit a few highlights on here because we've really just gone over the end of the year information. But this goes to the Division of Mental Health, and this is a way they monitor the financial status of the MCOs. Column 3 is the budget, column 4 is the actual year-to-date, and column 6 is the annualized percentage. They have different categories we report in, and also we made a few adjustments to the statements after the FMR was submitted. So if you compare the FMR to the year-end financials right now, they're not the same. This is also an interim report. We have to have it in. It went in by the end of August, and then after we close the books, we send in a final one at year-end. So there are a few discrepancies if you see that, and that's the reason for them. But based on the way we report back to the state, if you look at the total revenue about a third of the way down, you can see overall, including, and this includes all revenue sources, we realized 99.16% of the revenue. Total expenditures, which is in the next block, and this includes admin, service, state, Medicaid, federal, local, etc. We were at 93.65%. And again, if you think about the unspent admin dollars, that's probably the majority of that. This, the way you calculate the unrestricted fund balance for the state, shows that the unrestricted is 5.58%. So again, it's the way we're having to report on this report versus the way we report on your financial statements. If you look down in block 2, which is near the bottom, it talks about the current cash position. You see accounts payables on the accrual method is $17.3 million. So that includes all of the payables, including the estimations for state and federal. And then the receivable is $7.154 million. And there's a little more detail at the end on the fund balance. So again, this just goes to the state. There's a couple explanations on the second page about revenues that are under budget. One's on the Medicaid pass-through. That's almost gone away. So that's under, and then interest, virtually no interest anymore, but the interest is slightly under budget. The other fiscal monitoring report is required to be sent in also at the beginning of each fiscal year. It's item 3A. All this is it shows the prior year, which would tie back to the fiscal long-term report we just covered. And then in column 3, that is the adopted budget for this year, because the state wants to see what their budget is. That adopted budget here is 3 months in the closeout that's been estimated. So that would just tie back to what the board adopted a couple months ago. So, anything on that?
The finance committee members, you think about where we were a year ago, and we began in the spring talking about the merger with Smoky. And our concern throughout the spring was, what kind of condition, financial condition are we handing Western Highlands over? And I think the answer is pretty good. We're not handing them one massive liability. And, we're coming in with a financial, we're not sending, asking our brethren to help us out, bail us out. We're handing them a good, solid financially sound organization. Certainly, it's, I think it's as financially sound, I imagine, as Smoky. From what I don't know their finances, but I get the impression from what you're saying that we're not that far different. So, again, Charlie, to all the staff, thanks.
Yeah, there are a lot of great staff here. I've enjoyed working with them and, just trying to blend their organizations together and their processes, because they are somewhat different. Even though we're doing the same thing, we do things a little differently. So. I'm just going to give 2 quick updates on NC Tracks and close out, and I'll make it really short since we're running out of time. But okay, positive news, NC Tracks. No, I'm just kidding.
Gonna get studied by the general assembly, doesn't that make you feel better?
They all make it work.
Oh, come on, we want to hear your story about it too.
Obviously, there have been some issues with NC Tracks and the 820s, which are the cash payments for the Medicaid. They don't really tie back to the 834, which is telling you what you got paid. And actually, sometimes you don't even get one, or you may get 10 a month. So we're still working to reconcile the payments. Western Highlands payments, we've estimated over 2 months, have been about $1.3 million short, and we have reported that to the division and to DMA. And they actually ask us to report because we're all complaining that we aren't being paid what we're supposed to be paid. In some LMEs, it's really millions of dollars. It's not as small as this amount. So they ask us to submit and estimate what we think our payments have been under, and my belief is they're going to go ahead and try to pay that, even though it hasn't been paid yet. So we've done that. I know Western Highlands has submitted some billing files, and they've gone into what we used to always call the black hole. Nobody knows what's happened. There's been no response back, but we're still submitting and working with them to see what's happened. I know on the Smoky side, and I know this isn't about Smoky, but I know we got one file through that we got a response on. So I know they're starting to get through. I think MCOs are probably down on the bottom of the list, as far as getting the files processed for us.
What's the relationship, and I apologize, I'm probably the only person who really doesn't know, but I'll ask you on the camera and everything, the relationship between NC Fast and NC Tracks? It's kind of, it's maybe the man.
Will be the foundation system that has the individual consumers and their eligibility components in there. So it's what
That's why we're
NC
doing
Tracks will dig into to pull out eligibility. Does that make you feel better?
Makes me understand it more, but it doesn't make me feel any more comfortable and work properly. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, but like right now in NC Tracks, we haven't been able to retrieve reports or see reports. So, and I know we're working on the
NC
issues.
Fast, and I was going to throw that out. We're going to hard launch NC Fast. On the Medicaid side, it's one of the 5 pilot counties in the state, and we're trying to develop contingency plans. So whether that's you or you want somebody on your staff, there are going to be times you won't be able to see eligibility or no eligibility. So we're trying to develop a backup system for us so you can have 24/7 call center capacity to get that when you need it from consumers or providers can. So trying to figure that out. Because if you get through us by your Medicaid numbers, by the time the other counties roll out, it won't be near the issue, because you don't have near the Medicaid numbers in any of your other.
Great, that's
There will
great.
be times you can't see it, just like there are times now you can't see food stamp eligibility. You really look up and it's blank. We're just having no discussion. I mean, so think about if you're a provider and you're getting ready to bail and pull up Medicaid and it's blank.
For us, it's the, maybe we shouldn't even start talking about this, we'll have a blood pressure attack. It's, we get what's called a global eligibility file, and that's what we use basically to believe somebody is Medicaid eligible and therefore calculate or reconcile our capitation payment. And that's been a big problem, you know, that Lisa's alluding to. You know, the revenue that we've been receiving can't get reconciled because of that global eligibility file.
Yeah.
Like,
And the more you dig, the worse it gets.
And part of the discussions, I think the Canada County Commissioners Association meeting with county managers pretty much just berated the IT staff and others. They came and tried to explain to us what the issue was to try, they have one conference call with the IT professionals from social services. And it's something you all want to make sure that you might want to have your IT people touching base with, at least especially Buncombe's IT professionals, because if they're going hard.
We're soft launching money.
Yeah, you might want to make sure they're in touch with.
Now, that won't happen to you Monday, because in soft launch, we still have access to those systems.
Okay.
But
Hard
we'll
launch
hard
is over.
launch before January, which means the old EIS system will be gone, none of that data will be left.
So just a thought, it might be worth your while to be in your IT people, at least with Buncombe's, and I certainly know ours will be, but we're not where they are.
Do you have, for all 23 counties, their Medicaid, the numbers for all of them around the Medicaid baseline or their eligibles for all 23 in any one spreadsheet? I've seen them for the A. You don't know that?
Well, I mean, we know the, I don't know what we could manipulate from the global eligibility file.
But in your PM, when you get your PMPM, it gives you a Medicaid-based number for each county, right?
What it does is it's by individual.
Yeah, it's an individual
So you
list.
don't know
and
which
it's
county you're in
huge.
necessarily.
No, we do,
No,
we
they
do.
do.
We know
It's not, is it not bulk that way?
It's the detail, it's the
Right.
individual, their county, their Medicaid aid category, there's a whole bunch of other
Right.
Yes.
data elements with it, but it's down to the individual level for our PMPM. And we have to have that to reconcile back to say we didn't pay us for this person.
Yeah, if you getting away from the billing thing, but somewhere you all have some list for, I mean, you have some sense of how many Medicaid eligibles you have in every county.
Yeah,
Just a total. That's what I'm asking. Could I see that?
yes.
Yes. It doesn't
What
have
are
to
the-
be pretty or clean. It would just help as we think through rollout and back up how they're going to fall out for you. Because other than the pilots, you're going geographically for Medicaid, and that is not going to be fun for you because that means we'll go early, but everybody else you have will basically go at the same time, or with very little difference.
Right.
Your Avery people might be a little ahead of
Right.
your Cherokee, but
You design the report you want to see from
Okay.
us, okay, is the most,
well, and I could probably
That's
pull
way to
it,
do
and it might be easier than y'all having
or just write it down on a piece of paper,
Okay.
you know, what
Okay.
characteristics of the individual.
to. Okay.
Example.
One last thing about NC Tracks, and I hope this is going to work to our favor, because it isn't working well, and they opened up to allow NCOs to bill any prior year claim through September 30th, and because it's still not working well, I don't know if they will extend that deadline, or if we can say, well, we couldn't get billing through, so we need to get credit for this. So, you know, it may work in our favor, I don't know. So, we'll keep that positive thought and see. Just real quickly on the closeout, I think the closeout's going well, except for some of the NC track stuff. We're more closely monitoring the claims resolutions. We're getting a list of providers that have requested review of their claims, you know, the dollar amount, who it is, and I think that just gives more accountability with the staff to say it's being monitored, and then we're trying to set goals to say we want you to clean up this many a week. That way we can make sure we stay on track and resolve all those issues. So, again, I don't know, Brian, if you have anything to add about the closeout. I think it's going well. Just sticking with
Stick at
it.
it.
Yeah. So, Carl, that's all I have unless there are questions or.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Danny said it quietly, I'll say it a little louder, but better at that. Thank you, it was really well said, thank you.
Thank you.
If nothing else, we're adjourned.
Right.